India's journey to 2047 is a journey to India in doing the free trade agreement with itself, investing in itself, educating itself, caring for itself, ensuring itself, and unleashing itself. That is India's journey to Viksit Bharat. And when it unleashes itself, its sheer size makes it a superpower. Anytime even in our most modest avatars of the 50s or 60s, when India has unleashed itself, it has changed the way the world has responded to a particular issue. For example, India, at a time when it depended on all sorts of support from all sorts of actors in the 1940s, 50s, 60s, when we were a real poor country, and when the USSR and USA were shaping the world into their orbits, it was India and a few of its friends who stood up and created the third way, the non-aligned movement, the Bandung Conference, the G77. And we were able to ensure that neither of the two parties could run away with the world. We created an additionality. Our sheer size allows us to do that. India should not worry about being a superpower. That we are. 17% of humanity is not only superpower, we are superstars also. But that is not the point. What kind of a superpower are we is what we need to work on. Are we a superpower with only veto capabilities, which means if we don't do something, climate change will happen. If we don't do something, some other wrong thing. So do we want to be a negative veto superpower, or do we want to be a superpower that can create positive change? Can we build something? Are we an oppositional superpower that without our consent you can do nothing? Or are we a propositional superpower? We want to build a colony in Mars. We want to build out a space program. We want to build a tech program. We want to build a quantum program. Are we a propositional superpower, or are we an oppositional superpower? I think that's the question we need to answer. We can become the head of the global trade union today and no one can win. No one can shout louder than us, right? If we decide that our superpowerdom is being in the global opposition, let's be the global opposition. Do you understand what I'm doing?
I get it. But so in order to become a prepositional superpower where we are actually building something, one very important factor is input. Input either in the form of raw material or in the form of money, which is external dollars. For both of them, we're dependent on two different countries, at least for time being. Right? So for example, unless we get external capital, for example, funds or dollars in the country, which is, let's say, America's giving it to the world because they are the economic hub of the world. Until we have a great relationship with them, our speed of growth will be much slower if we decide to do just everything by ourselves. So we need to have a great relationship with them in order to do that.
So my take on this is this: you're not wrong. So wait, I'm not disagreeing with you. But I think that is half the story. Here is my take. If you look at the numbers, this year, I was reading a report that we could be hitting close to 90 or $95 billion of FDI. I'm sure that on an average over the last 10 years, we would have probably received remittances of $150 billion, which is more than the FDI, right? If you add up the total stock of investments from USA and Europe into India versus the total build out in India over the last 70 years, international investments have been minimal. India has invested in itself. If you look at sectors specifically, let's look at climate, right? We talk about green sectors. We talk about green energy, solar energy, one of the big success stories in the last 10 years. 85% of climate finance has never left its home. International climate finance does not come to distant geographies. India's climate revolution, the green revolution, is happening on India's own accords, right? Our surpluses, our reserves, our investable capital is investing in India's green future. Of course, it is catalyzed, sustained, supported by international investments. So international investments are the cherry on the cake. The cake is domestic. So I'm not saying we should not be looking at cream and cheese. We should seek it. Like you said, it will give you a bump up of a few basis points in your growth story. So if you're growing normally at 6.5 to 7% through domestic endeavors, you could get a 0.5% bump up if international people participate. But here is the story. The minute you make India a investable story, Indians start investing in their own story, international funds will flow. They are looking for additionality. They're looking for optionality. In 2008, there was one country that was $4 trillion and had $2,600 per capita income. In the next 10 years, that country was to become the preferred trading partner for over 100 countries. It was in the middle of that journey of 10 years, it bailed out Greece and some European countries as well. And of course, acquired their ports and infrastructure in those countries as well. It built the BRI, right? That country from $4 trillion and $2,600 per capita in the next 10 years was to become a global superpower just on sheer economic terms. This is India's record. We are at $4 trillion and $2,600 per capita income. And if we play the game right, we are adding a South Africa to our GDP every year today. When people say, is Vietnam an opportunity? India should say we add a Vietnam to our GDP every year. Come in and look for that Vietnam here. That is our story. But for that to be sellable, India must invest in itself. I think our big challenge is to get our private sector to invest in the India story. Most of the big investment that are happening are on infrastructure through, public funds. We need to get private funds, private capital coming in. We need, we need the animal spirit of 100 Ambanis and Adanis investing into the country. हमारा दूसरा होता है, we don't celebrate these investors. We like to always cast shadows on their contribution. So we have to actually rethink what we want to do with ourselves.
I'm quite intrigued that you believe that if India starts investing in itself, around the world, people will start investing in itself. So we should not be worried about international relations much, should we?
No. Don't get me wrong. I think it is absolutely an imperative for us to engage with the important geographies, but to engage with the not so important geographies very intimately now. And I'll explain to you. Let me give you one example. Who would have thought that sitting today, nearly a third of Indian homes would have cooking oil supplied from Argentina? Right? Shocking, but it's true. Now, imagine that same country who is supplying our cooking oil to us, right, on the one end of the spectrum, is also going to be a country that is going to be catering to our lithium needs for our EV transformations. Because Kabil, one of the Indian public sector undertakings, has exploration licenses for lithium mines in Argentina. I think one of the MOUs is already signed. A couple of others are being signed. And India is going to be acquiring significant acreage overseas to bring lithium or lithium-derived products back home. So I think it's now certainly, who would have thought that Argentina should be a priority country for India's foreign policy? Now, guess what? From your food to your energy, that country is going to be defining it. And you cannot ignore these countries. You can't ignore Latin America because, when 17% of humanity is seeking all sorts of inputs, from food to energy to resources to cultural inputs and products, you have to engage with all the world. It's not just the US or again, let's go back to the China story. Preferred trading partner for 100+ countries in the first decade of its transformation. China was not focusing just on the US. Its BRI was a project to link the I always joke and tell people, Indo-Pacific ki batein US karta hai. US talks about the Indo-Pacific. China has actually built it. China was the architect of the Indo-Pacific. It is the single biggest beneficiary of the Indo-Pacific. It is the most important actor in the Indo-Pacific. The rest only talk about it. Chinese invest in it. They have actually built ports, they've built interests, they have built industry, they have built economic, relationships, equities in much of these attractions. Not only the Indo-Pacific, they've also, Russia used to talk about Eurasia, right? Chinese have actually made it happen. There are trains that stop in Vienna from China. In the previous century, if you had 1,000 Chinese getting off a train station in Vienna, it would be called an invasion. Today, it is, integration. So in some sense, the Chinese have also connected the Eurasian, geographies like no other person before Genghis Khan tried to do. Since Genghis Khan has tried to do. So in some sense, look, they are connecting the waters, they are connecting the lands, and they have understood that the responsibility for globalization of tomorrow is no longer Western. It is Eastern. And China is bearing the burden of that globalization by not only engaging, but also investing. India has to not only engage and explore, but also invest and commit. And I think that is the India story over the next 10 years. How much can we commit to the world which is far away? Because that world will shape everything near and close to us.
Tell me top 3 countries which is very underrated and India should invest in their relationships with them from purely strategic economic point of view.
Look, I would argue that one of our most important partners in the future, which is quite at the margins in our imagination, is Indonesia, for example. For me, it's shocking. Andaman and Nicobar is closer to Indonesia than to Delhi. It's true that, it's literally a maritime neighbor. We share the most important passage in global politics, which is the Malacca Strait. In some sense, we are sitting on top of it, and they are they're part owners of that particular strait. Now, look, that country, so big, rising quickly, large population, we are linked at the hips. Our growth and their growth is going to be in many ways virtuous to each other. They have already become as big, if not bigger, than our bilateral trade with UK and Germany in some sense. And yet in our imaginations as common Indians, we talk about UK and Germany, we talk about France and Italy. We don't talk about the country that's already so big and such a proximate neighbor. For example, I think we have to think about these kind of geographies. Again, we have forgotten Central Asia. Now it's since you mentioned 3, so one is
Indonesia.
Is clearly ASEAN, and Indonesia stands out. The second is obviously, I would say, Central Asia, which I think is absolutely barren and virgin tract as far
Which
as
specific country in Central Asia?
No, look, let's take 2 of them, right? Let's take the 2 big ones. For example, the smaller ones we have engaged with because they were tactically important for us, for Afghanistan and others. But I'm now talking about from a comprehensive engagement. So, clearly Astana and, Almaty, Astana in Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan, huge. Look, Uzbekistan is a resource-rich country. You want gold? They have gold. You want rare earth? They have rare earth. You want metals? They have metals. You want all sorts of resources and inputs? They have that. My point is that the lesson from the China and even the more recent, the older Japanese growth stories have been that you will need to invest in geographies that cater to your strategic imperatives. If India's strategic imperatives will have to be building out the nation, building up the nation, building up our infrastructure, energy, roads, ports, capabilities and electronics, etc., we will require inputs. You were mentioning that in your, we need inputs. One is finance, but we require material inputs, right? You will need to go to Central Asia. You will need to go to Russia. You will need to have Africa in the Lobuto corridor in your radar. That's a third geography. You will have to be present in some of those geographies if you need to be catering to your gluttonous hunger for resources, right? We are at that stage. If we are going to be adding a Vietnam or a South Africa to our GDP every year, we will need those kind of material inputs. Money is one part of it. But if we can secure these value chains, if we can secure these supply chains, investors are looking for optionality, additionality. They want places they can put money into. Today, you have lazy capital in the world, giving you returns of 1 or 2%. They want geographies that are exciting, dynamic, and going to turn around their investments quickly. And India should be that very exciting place.
Why we are not today?
I think for 2 reasons. One of them is that, we have a and it's very interesting since you asked this, and look, I'm doing some blue sky thinking with you now. Here is my take. We all, rightly so, focus on India's young youth, young demography, and the large number of young people, aspirational folks who reside in this part, and that's true. That's one side of the coin. The second side of the coin is that we are a 5,000-year-old civilization. And it struck me because recently at the Raisina dialogue, someone asked a question or someone said something, and I remember the External Affairs Minister saying that, look, it depends on where you come from. If you've been around for 5,000 years, then 70 years is not that significant a slice to to reach a conclusion on directions of the world, right? And I think that's probably also true of the way we think about our economic and aspirational inertia. And I think that's the word. We have civilizational inertia on the one end of the coin, and we have a youth and aspirational demography on the other side of the coin. And India is caught between these two urges. A young India that wants much more. And by the way, it's true. You walk in the street, and I'll tell you what, no matter the fact that we may not have been able to give too many things to too many people, and although we have progressed significantly, much to do, you still see most Indians with a conviction that tomorrow will be better than yesterday. And that's not something that you can say of most countries in the world. In India, you will still find that the majority of young people will say, my tomorrow will be better than today. And that is something that is, I think, India's X factor. The fact that most of them believe that tomorrow is theirs to seize. And I think that's what holds them back is sometimes the grandness of our civilizational imprint. 5,000 years, and we've been there, and for the last 1,800 years out of the 20 centuries, we have been either the number one or number two GDP. We will get it back. It's a matter of time. And I think that kind of mellows the enthusiasm that the youth display. So I think we have to animate the young, and we have to forget our civilizational grandness on the other hand. For the next 50 years, we have to forget about the last 5,000 years and think about the next 50. I think that's, if we can just turn our head and look ahead, don't forget our past. I mean, I'm not saying that, but don't let it weigh you down. I sometimes think that our achievements of the past, or the fact that we have persisted as a civilization, which is a success, huge success of human endeavor, human resilience. Our survival over the last 5,000 years should not become a way to keep us anchored to a different era.
एक चीज बता, क्योंकि अपना इतना ज्यादा सिविलाइजेशनल बैगेज है, या कभी कभी हम सोचते हैं कि हम इतने सालों,
बैगेज नहीं है, मैं कहता हूँ हमारी एक
कभी हमारी देखो, हमारी वो जो स्ट्रेंथ है वही हमारा कभी कभी बैगेज है इस सोच में.
I would say that our what does our 5,000 years or more of existence tell us? It tells us that externalities have shaken us, but have never been able to unseat us. We have remained, we have persisted, we have survived, we have sustained, irrespective of this, all the externalities, both human induced as well as natural catastrophes. And we have persisted as human beings. I would also tell folks when I was studying in the UK that, look, we must have done something right. All your books talk about the invasions in India from the last 2,000 years, right? But look, my religion remains, my customs remain, my traditions remain, my food remains, everything remains. How did it survive if we did not win some battles, if we did not win certain arguments, if we did not score certain debates in our favor? We must have done some things right to have been able to sustain ourselves over all this time, irrespective of what your books talk about us. If you read your books, we have been destroyed 20 times over, and yet 1.4 billion of us remain. So कुछ तो हुआ होगा,
बहुत कुछ हुआ होगा.
So I think हमारी civilization को dismiss नहीं करना चाहिए. I think it must in fact become the foundation of us looking ahead. Now we don't have to look back. Our forefathers have given us the luxury of not looking back. They are looking after our back. We have the luxury of just looking ahead. We don't have to build a history. We are born with it. Most countries are building their histories. You go to most Western geographies, this is a heritage home, 80 years old. The home you are recording it is 80 years old. My point I'm trying to tell you is that in a different country, you would say we are in a heritage basement. But we are not, right? So my point here is that we have been given, our legacy empowers us to look ahead, because our ancestors have built our past and have safeguarded it.
True.
And I think that's what we have to be thinking about. You know where you come from. And I think that's why folks like you and many other storytellers in India who are producing content today. And I say that India must become the content subcontinent. We must become the content creators for the world.